I should have known something was wrong the moment I read the message. It wasn't rude. It wasn't aggressive. It was polite in that clean, distant way people use when they don't want to owe you anything emotionally. Christmas dinner. 7:30 p.m. Maison verte. That was it. No emoji. No warmth. No can't wait to see you. Just a place I couldn't pronounce without slowing down and a time that felt more like a reservation than an invitation. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. The screen dimmed once, then twice, before I locked it and slipped it into my jacket pocket like it hadn't just unsettled something in my chest. Maison verte. I'd driven past it a dozen times. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Soft golden lighting. The kind of restaurant where the menus don't list prices, and the waiters look like they've been trained to judge you silently. It wasn't our kind of place. Not my wife's. Not mine. Definitely not somewhere my stepdaughter had ever suggested before. But it was Christmas. And Christmas, in my world, had always come with expectations. I told myself that's all this was. A gesture. An attempt. Maybe even a peace offering, dressed up in linen tablecloths and expensive wine. I told myself a lot of things that night, mostly because it was easier than admitting the one thought that kept trying to surface. But I'd been married to her mother for 8 years. 8 years of showing up. 8 years of paying for birthdays, college deposits, emergency flights, rent gaps, car repairs. 8 years of being the steady one. The one who didn't yell. The one who didn't leave. The one who always covered the bill when the check hit the table like an unspoken agreement. And still, I was never quite family. Not really. I stood in the bedroom tightening my tie, watching my reflection like it belonged to someone else. The man in the mirror looked put together, pressed shirt, clean shoes, hair combed back carefully, but his eyes gave him away. There was something tentative there. A question he'd learned not to ask out loud. Do they want me there, or do they just need me there? My wife sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, already dressed. She looked good. She always did when we were going somewhere public. She glanced up once, quick and distracted. What time did she say? She asked. 7:30, I said. She nodded. We should leave soon. Traffic will be bad. That was it. No comment on the place. No excitement. No curiosity. Just logistics. Like we were attending an obligation instead of a holiday dinner. I almost asked if she thought the timing was strange. Almost asked if her daughter had said anything else. Almost asked if this felt off. But I didn't. Because asking would mean admitting I was nervous. And I was tired of feeling small for wanting reassurance. The drive was quiet. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where words sit just behind your teeth, unsaid because you don't know if they'll make things better or worse. Christmas lights blurred past the windows. Couples laughed on sidewalks. Families posed for photos outside storefronts decorated in red and gold. I wondered what it looked like from the outside. A man driving his wife to a fancy Christmas dinner. What it felt like was different. It felt like walking into a room where everyone else had already decided who you were. Halfway there, my phone buzzed again. A new message. Don't be late. We already ordered. I read it twice. Already ordered. The words landed wrong. Not because of what they said, but because of what they assumed. That I'd be late. That my presence wasn't required for the beginning. That my role was flexible. Optional. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 7:18. We're cutting it close, my wife said, not looking at me. Traffic, I replied. She hummed in response, unconcerned. I wanted to laugh. Or maybe ask who orders Christmas dinner without waiting for everyone. Or maybe point out that I'd rearranged my entire day to be there on time. But instead, I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel and focused on the road. This was familiar territory. I'd learned long ago that being dependable often meant being overlooked. That providing came with silence. That if you complained, even once, you risked becoming the problem instead of the solution. So I stayed quiet. We pulled up to the restaurant at 7:36. Valet took the keys. Glass doors opened with a soft hiss of warm air and muted music. Inside, everything gleamed, crystal, polished wood, soft laughter drifting between tables. It smelled like wine and money and conversations that didn't include the word budget. I scanned the room instinctively. And then I saw them. Their table was near the window. Empty plates stacked neatly. Wine glasses half full. Napkins folded like they were already done with the evening. They weren't waiting. My stepdaughter was mid-laugh, leaning back in her chair, phone in hand. My wife's sister sat beside her, nodding along. Everyone looked relaxed. Comfortable. Finished. My stomach dropped. For a second, no one noticed us. We stood there like an afterthought, coats still on, unsure where to put ourselves. Then my stepdaughter looked up. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You're here." The word finally hovered unspoken. My wife laughed lightly. "Traffic was terrible." My stepdaughter smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She gestured to the table. "We already ate," she said casually. "But you can still join us." A waiter appeared instantly, like he'd been waiting for permission to acknowledge me. He placed a leather-bound folder gently on the table. "The bill." My stepdaughter slid it toward me with 2 fingers. "Oh, and I think I texted the wrong time," she added. "Sorry about that. But since you're here anyway." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. My wife laughed again. Louder this time. "Oh my God," she said. "It's fine. It's Christmas." All eyes turned to me. Waiting. Expectant. Like this was the most natural thing in the world. I looked down at the bill. The number at the bottom was more than I'd spent on groceries all month. More than I'd planned. More than I'd been asked. And yet, somehow, exactly what everyone expected. In that moment, something settled heavily in my chest. Not anger. Recognition. This wasn't a mistake. This was a role. And I'd been playing it for years. I forced a smile. Not because I was happy, but because it was reflex. Because it was what I'd always done when the room leaned on me. I picked up the bill. There's a special kind of humiliation that doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly, like cold air through a cracked window, settling into places you didn't know were exposed. I stood there holding my coat, the leather bill folder resting under my palm, and suddenly I was aware of everything at once. The hum of conversation around us, the soft clink of silverware, the faint scent of dessert wine lingering in the air. The night had already moved on without me. This table had already lived its moment. They made space for us, but not really. Chairs scraped. A purse was shifted. Someone pulled their phone closer to their plate like they were guarding territory. I sat down carefully, as if sitting too hard might crack whatever fragile calm still existed. My wife slipped into her seat beside me, still smiling, still unbothered. "So," my stepdaughter said, stretching the word out. "How was traffic?" Her tone was light. Almost bored. "Bad?" I said. "One word. Neutral." She nodded, already losing interest. "Yeah, we figured." The waiter hovered nearby, polite and efficient, eyes flicking between the empty place setting in front of me and the finished plates stacked at the edge of the table. He cleared his throat softly. "Would you like to see the dessert menu, sir?" Before I could answer, my stepdaughter waved a hand. "Oh, we're done," she said. "He won't need it." Not my name. Not we. Just a designation. A role. The waiter glanced at me, hesitating for half a second, then nodded and stepped back. That half second stretched longer than it should have. Long enough for me to feel like a child being spoken for. I opened the bill folder. The number stared back at me, bold and unapologetic. It wasn't just the total, it was the details underneath. Bottles of wine I hadn't tasted. Appetizers I hadn't seen. Entrees described with words I couldn't pronounce. Experiences I hadn't been invited to. My wife leaned over, peeking at the amount, and let out a soft whistle. "Wow," she said, laughing. "You guys really went all out." There it was again. You guys. Not us. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. "You could have waited," I said quietly. I didn't mean it as an accusation. More like a statement of fact. A bridge, maybe. Something to stand on. My stepdaughter shrugged. "You said 7:30. We were hungry." "It was 7:30, I replied, glancing at my watch. She smiled thinly. "Technically." The table laughed. Not cruelly. That was the problem. It wasn't cruel laughter, it was casual. Comfortable. The kind of laughter that assumes everyone is on the same side. Except I wasn't. I felt my face warm. Not from anger. From exposure. From realizing I was the only one at that table who hadn't been in on the joke. My wife reached for my arm. "Come on," she said softly. "Don't start. Don't start." As if I was the one disrupting something sacred. I looked around the table. Her sister avoided my eyes. Her husband suddenly found his phone fascinating. My stepdaughter leaned back, arms crossed, waiting. Waiting for me to do what I always did. I thought about all the other tables I'd paid for. Not just meals, moments. Vacations where I'd stayed back while everyone else swam. Celebrations where my name was missing from the thank you speeches. Emergencies where my contribution was expected, not appreciated. I told myself that was what being a man meant. Show up. Shut up. The waiter returned, holding a card reader discreetly. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His presence was the final nudge, the quiet pressure of social expectation. I took a breath. Then another. I realized something in that pause. No one had asked me how my day was. No one had said Merry Christmas. No one had even pretended this dinner was about being together. It was a transaction. And I was the account. "I didn't order any of this," I said. The words landed heavier than I expected. The table went quiet, not shocked, just alert. My stepdaughter raised an eyebrow. So, I repeated, choosing each word carefully, "I wasn't here." My wife sighed. Loudly. "Oh my God," she said. "Why are you being like this?" "Being like this? What? Where?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I'd defended. The woman I'd chosen peace with over honesty more times than I could count. "I'm just saying," I replied, keeping my voice even, "this feels awkward." My stepdaughter cut in. "No," I said. "Disrespectful." That did it. She straightened in her chair. "Disrespectful?" she echoed. "Are you serious right now?" My wife leaned closer to me, her voice dropping. "Please," she whispered. "Not here." There was the unspoken rule. Don't embarrass us. Even if you're already embarrassed. Even if you're the only one paying for it. I glanced at the other tables. No one was watching. Or maybe they were. It was hard to tell. The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were listening. "I just think it's strange," I said slowly, "to invite someone to dinner after you finished eating." My stepdaughter scoffed. "You're acting like we planned this." I met her eyes. For the first time that night, I didn't look away. "Didn't you?" Silence. Not denial. Just silence. My wife laughed nervously, trying to break it. "Oh, let's not do this. It's Christmas. We're all tired. He'll pay, we'll move on, and this doesn't have to be a thing." The sentence settled something inside me. Not anger. Decision. I closed the bill folder. The sound was soft, but it cut through the table like a knife. Everyone watched my hands. I rested the folder flat on the table. And I didn't slide my card inside. I could feel my heart pounding now, loud and insistent. Not fear exactly. More like a warning. A reminder that something was changing. My stepdaughter frowned. "What are you doing?" I looked at her. Then at my wife. Then at the table that had already eaten without me. "I'm thinking," I said. And for the first time in years, that was true. The waiter shifted uncomfortably. My wife opened her mouth to speak. I raised a hand, not aggressively. Just enough. "Give me a minute," I said. They stared at me like they didn't recognize me anymore. Neither did I. And that scared them. It scared me too. But not enough to stop. Because for the first time all night, the empty place setting in front of me didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a mirror. The strange thing about moments like this is how loud everything becomes once you stop moving. When I said I needed a minute, I didn't mean 60 seconds. I'm in space. I meant the kind of pause that lets you hear your own thoughts instead of everyone else's expectations. I stayed seated, hands resting on the table, fingers lightly touching the closed bill folder as if it might run away. The room didn't wait with me. Conversations at nearby tables continued. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. Life went on while mine stalled. That's when the memories started lining up. Not dramatically. Not like a montage. Just quietly, one after another, the way receipts pile up in a drawer you keep meaning to clean. I saw myself 8 years earlier, standing in a moving truck parking lot, signing papers for an apartment that wasn't mine. My stepdaughter had been 19, angry at the world, crying in short bursts she pretended were allergies. Her mother had squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you for doing this." I'd felt proud then. Necessary. I remembered tuition statements arriving in thick envelopes. Rent transfers. "I'll pay you back," texts that slowly stopped including timelines. I remembered my name missing from group photos, cropped out because I was the one holding the camera. I told myself that was maturity. That was what men did. You provide. You absorb. You don't keep score. Except I had been keeping score. I just hadn't admitted it. Across the table, my stepdaughter shifted in her chair, irritated by the delay. "Are we seriously doing this?" she asked. "It's not that deep." I looked up at her. That phrase, "it's not that deep," had been used on me more times than I could count. It was a way of shrinking something uncomfortable into something dismissible. A way of telling me my feelings were an inconvenience. "I'm not making it deep," I said. "I'm making it honest." My wife exhaled sharply through her nose. "You always do this," she said. "Boys." The word hit harder than it should have. "Do what?" I asked. "Turn things into a whole conversation," she replied. "When they don't need to be." I almost laughed. Because the truth was, I'd spent years doing the opposite. Turning conversations into silence. Turning discomfort into jokes. Turning resentment into late-night walks where no one could hear me think. The waiter hovered again, uncertainty written all over his face. "Sir," he said gently, "whenever you're ready." Whenever you're ready. As if readiness were the problem. I glanced down at the bill again, and this time I didn't just see numbers. I saw patterns. I saw how easily everyone had assumed I'd cover it. How little discussion there had been. How my absence hadn't delayed anything. I wasn't a guest. I was infrastructure. "I want to be clear about something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I didn't agree to pay for this." My stepdaughter scoffed. "You always pay." There was not an argument. A statement of fact. The table went quiet again, this time heavier. Even my wife didn't interrupt. She stared at me, searching my face like she was trying to remember when I'd last surprised her. "I always pay," I repeated slowly. "You're right." That admission seemed to throw them off balance. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It was calm. Observational. "And the reason I always pay," I continued, "is because I never say no." My wife shook her head. "This is embarrassing," she muttered. I nodded. "It is." She looked up sharply. "So why are you doing it?" I met her gaze. "Because I'm tired of pretending it doesn't hurt." That was the deepest thing I'd said all night. And no one laughed. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like circulation returning to a limb that had been numb for too long. I thought about my father then. He'd been the same kind of man. Quiet. Dependable. Always there. Always last to sit down. Always first to stand when something needed fixing. I remembered how people spoke about him at his retirement party. Solid. Reliable. Never complained. No one had asked him what it cost. I wondered suddenly if this was how it started. The slow erosion. The way you wake up one day and realize your value has been reduced to what you can cover financially and emotionally. "I'm not saying I won't ever help," I said. "I'm saying I don't want this to be assumed." My stepdaughter rolled her eyes. "So what, you want a medal?" "No," I replied. "I want respect." The words sat between us like something fragile. My wife leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You're making yourself the victim," she said. I took that in. Then I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm just done pretending I'm not affected." I could feel the shift now. Subtle but undeniable. The dynamic was changing, and none of us knew what the new shape would be. The waiter cleared his throat again. I can split the bill if that helps, he offered. It was a kind gesture. A way out. But I didn't want a workaround. I wanted acknowledgement. I'll pay for my drink, I said. Everyone froze. What? My wife asked. I'll pay for what I had, I repeated. Nothing else. My stepdaughter stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. You can't be serious. I nodded. I am. My heart was pounding now, but there was clarity in it. The kind that comes when you stop negotiating with yourself. This is unbelievable, my wife said. After everything we've done for you. I almost corrected her. Almost said everything I've done for you. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about tallying debts. It was about boundaries. I'm not trying to punish anyone, I said. I'm just not willing to keep disappearing. Silence followed. Longer this time. I reached into my wallet and placed my card on the table, next to the bill folder, not inside it. A small distinction, but it mattered. The waiter picked it up carefully, like he understood he was holding more than plastic. As he walked away, my wife leaned toward me, her voice low and sharp. You're changing, she said. I looked at her. I know, I replied. And for the first time, I didn't apologize for it. As the waiter processed the payment, I sat back in my chair and felt something unfamiliar settle over me. Not victory. Not peace. Awareness. The man who always pays had finally asked himself why. And once you ask that question, there's no going back. I didn't plan to smile. It just happened. Right after I said I'd pay for my drink and nothing else, right after the silence thickened and everyone started recalculating who they thought I was, my face did something unexpected. The corners of my mouth lifted slightly. Not enough to be friendly. Not enough to be mocking. Enough to be calm. That smile confused them more than anger ever could have. Anger would have fit the story they'd already written for me, the overreacting stepfather, the man who finally snapped. Calm didn't fit. Calm meant intention. Calm meant I'd thought this through. My stepdaughter was the first to react. Why are you smiling? She asked, suspicion sharpening her voice. I looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. I wasn't trying to intimidate her. I was just taking her in. The crossed arms. The tight jaw. The confidence of someone who had never had their assumptions challenged. Because I finally understand something, I said. My wife shifted beside me. I could feel her tension without looking at her. The way she leaned forward slightly, like she was bracing for impact. Understand what? She asked. I turned to her. That I've been confusing peace with silence. Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't interrupt. That alone told me this moment mattered. The waiter returned, holding the card reader, eyes darting between faces like he'd wandered into the middle of an argument without knowing the rules. He cleared his throat softly. Whenever you're ready, sir. I nodded. 1 second. I placed my hand flat on the bill folder and slid it back toward the center of the table. Not toward myself, not toward anyone else. Just back where it belonged. That small motion landed harder than words. My stepdaughter leaned forward. You're really doing this? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence work. I'd spent years filling silence for everyone else. Tonight I let it sit. I came here tonight because you invited me, I said finally. I rearranged my day. I showed up on time. And when I walked in, dinner was already over. So what? She snapped. You want an apology? I shook my head. No. I want acknowledgement. My wife laughed nervously, the sound brittle. You're being dramatic. That word again. I turned to her slowly. If this were happening to you, I said, would you be laughing? She froze. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't accused her. I just asked a question she couldn't answer honestly without unraveling something. Across the table, her sister shifted uncomfortably. Her husband stared at the tablecloth like it held the secrets of the universe. My stepdaughter exhaled sharply. This is ridiculous. You're acting like we set you up. I met her eyes. Did you not? Again, no denial. Just irritation. That's not fair, my wife said quickly. She made a mistake. I nodded. Then the mistake could have been acknowledged. She said she texted the wrong time. And then handed me the bill, I replied. The words hung there, undeniable. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger. Not sadness. Authority. Not over them, over myself. I'm not embarrassed, I said. I'm disappointed. My stepdaughter scoffed. Oh, please. No, I said calmly. Listen to me. That got her attention. I'm disappointed because I've spent years trying to show up in a way that made things easier for everyone else. And tonight showed me how invisible that effort has become. My wife shook her head. That's not true. Then tell me, I said gently, what part of tonight made you think of me? She stared at me. Seconds passed. She had nothing. The waiter shifted again, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. I turned to him. I'll settle my part now, I said. And then we'll be done. My stepdaughter slammed her hand lightly on the table. Unbelievable. I smiled again. That was when everything changed. Not because the smile was smug, but because it was steady. It said I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. You know what's unbelievable? I said. That you expected this to work. My wife leaned in close, her voice sharp and low. You're humiliating us. I met her gaze without flinching. I was humiliated the moment I walked in. She recoiled slightly, like she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. I didn't make a scene, I continued. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone. All I did was stop pretending. The room felt smaller now, tighter. Other diners glanced over briefly, then away. The illusion of privacy was cracking. My stepdaughter crossed her arms again. So what happens now? It was the first honest question she'd asked all night. I considered it. What happens now, I said, is I stop being treated like an ATM with a personality. My wife gasped softly. That's unfair. Is it? I asked. She didn't answer. The waiter returned with the receipt for my drink. I signed it slowly, deliberately. Each stroke felt symbolic, like I was signing something larger than a check. As I handed the pen back, I felt lighter. Not relieved, but aligned. Like my actions finally matched the thoughts I'd been swallowing for years. My stepdaughter stood abruptly. I can't believe this is happening on Christmas. I looked up at her. Neither can I. My wife stayed seated, staring at the table. You could have just paid, she said quietly. We could have talked about this later. I shook my head. Later never comes. She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing a stranger. You're different, she said. I nodded. I know. And what if I don't like this version? She asked. The question hurt more than I expected. But I answered anyway. Then that's something we'll have to talk about, I said. Not tonight. I stood up, slipping my coat on slowly, giving the moment the weight it deserved. My stepdaughter watched me like she was trying to decide whether to be angry or afraid. I looked at the table one last time. The empty plates, the half-finished wine, the bill still unpaid. I came here to be part of something, I said. Not to be used for it. No one stopped me. As I walked toward the door, I felt the room breathe again. Behind me, voices rose, confused, sharp, defensive. But none of them called my name. The glass doors opened, and cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. I stepped outside and paused, my reflection briefly catching in the glass. The man staring back at me was smiling. Not because he'd won. Because he'd finally stopped losing himself. And somewhere behind me, I knew they were realizing something too. The role I'd played so well was no longer available. I didn't get far before my phone started vibrating. I was halfway down the block, the restaurant already behind me, when the first call came through. I didn't answer it. I knew who it was. I knew what she'd say. And I knew that if I picked up too soon, I'd slip back into the version of myself that apologized just to keep the night from getting worse. So I kept walking. Cold air burned my lungs. Christmas lights shimmered in storefront windows, cheerful and indifferent. Somewhere down the street, someone laughed loudly. Life, apparently, had no interest in pausing for my crisis. My phone buzzed again. Then again. A text followed. Where are you going? I stopped at the corner and leaned against a lamppost, the metal cold through my coat. My hands were shaking now, not with fear, but with the delayed release of adrenaline. Standing up for yourself does that. No one tells you how exposed it makes you feel once the moment passes. Another text. You embarrassed everyone. There was. Not, are you okay? Not that went badly. Just blame, neatly packaged. I typed slowly, deliberately. I needed space. The reply came almost instantly. You didn't need to make a scene. I laughed under my breath. A short, humorless sound. A scene. I'd walked out quietly. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't insulted anyone. But I'd disrupted the expectation that I would swallow whatever was placed in front of me. And apparently, that was loud enough. I started walking again, heading nowhere in particular. The night felt wide and empty, like it was waiting for me to decide who I was going to be in it. My phone rang. This time, I answered. What? I said. You can't just leave, my wife snapped. Her voice was tight, controlled, but underneath it I could hear something else. Panic. Do you have any idea how this looks? I closed my eyes for a moment. How it looks to who? That's not the point, she said quickly. Everyone's asking questions. Let them, I replied. Silence crackled through the line. You're being selfish, she said finally. There was. The word that always came out when I stopped cooperating. I'm being honest, I said. There's a difference. She scoffed. You picked Christmas to do this? I stopped walking. Christmas is exactly why, I said. Because tonight showed me what I actually mean in that room. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her tone had shifted, cooler, sharper. So what, you're punishing us? No, I said. I'm protecting myself. Another pause. You always do this, she said. You make everything about how you feel. The irony almost made me dizzy. For years, I said quietly, I've made everything about how you feel. Tonight was the first time I didn't. She exhaled sharply. You're unbelievable. I almost apologized. Almost. But instead I said, I'll come home later. Don't bother, she snapped and hung up. I stood there staring at my phone. The call ended, the screen dark. For a moment, loneliness washed over me, thick, heavy, familiar. This was the cost I'd always feared. The price of not smoothing things over. I wondered if this was how it always went. If every man who stopped playing his assigned role had to walk through this quiet, empty stretch afterward. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't her. It was my stepdaughter. You really enjoyed humiliating us, didn't you? I read the message twice. Then I typed back. I didn't humiliate anyone. I stopped agreeing to something I wasn't asked about. Dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. You've always had an issue with me. That one stung. Because part of me had always tried not to. That's not true, I wrote. I've tried to support you. The response came slower this time. Support doesn't come with conditions. I stared at that sentence. There was the heart of it. To them, support meant access without consent. Giving without boundaries. Love without limits. Respect isn't a condition, I typed. It's the baseline. No reply. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and kept walking until my legs ached and my thoughts slowed. Eventually, I found myself on a quiet bench in a small park, the grass dusted with frost, the trees strung with lights that blinked on and off like uncertain thoughts. I sat there for a long time. I thought about the man I'd been at that table. How easily they'd dismissed him. How confidently they'd expected him to comply. And I thought about the man who'd stood up. That man felt unfamiliar. Rough around the edges. Unpolished. But real. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from my wife. You've changed. I don't know who you are right now. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Then I typed back. I'm still me. I just stopped disappearing. I didn't get a response. I sat there as the night deepened, feeling the weight of what I'd done settle into something steadier. Not triumph. Not regret. Consequence. Standing up for yourself doesn't end the conflict. It reveals it. And as I finally stood to head home, alone, uninvited, no longer needed for payment, I understood something with a clarity that surprised me. The hardest part wasn't walking away from the table. It was accepting that some people preferred me silent. And deciding I no longer could be. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was replaying the argument, though parts of it surfaced whether I invited them or not, but because something fundamental had shifted and my body hadn't caught up yet. When you spend years bracing for impact, letting go of that tension doesn't feel like relief at first. It feels like falling. I lay awake listening to the quiet of the house, noticing details I'd never paid attention to before. The refrigerator's low hum. The clock's second hand clicking like it was counting something down. My wife's side of the bed empty. She hadn't come home. That should have hurt more than it did. What I felt instead was clarity. Uncomfortable. Honest. By morning, the world looked unchanged. Same street. Same neighbors. Same December lights slanting through the windows. But I moved through it differently, like I was testing a new posture, figuring out how to carry myself without the old weight. Coffee tasted stronger. The silence felt deliberate instead of punishing. My phone stayed face down on the counter. I didn't check it. That alone was a decision. For years, I trained myself to be reachable, available, ready to respond before anyone even asked. Being needed had become my proof of worth. Without it, I'd worried there'd be nothing left. That morning, I realized how wrong I'd been. I took a shower and let the water run longer than usual, watching steam cloud the mirror until my reflection blurred. For a moment, I liked not seeing myself clearly. It felt like permission, to be unfinished, to be in progress. When I stepped out, my phone buzzed. A message from my wife. We need to talk. 3 words. Neutral. Controlled. Not an apology. Not an accusation. I sat at the kitchen table and read it again. In the past, those words would have sent me scrambling, rehearsing explanations, preparing concessions. Today, I took a breath and noticed something new. I wasn't afraid. Later today, I replied. I'm not ready yet. The dots appeared. Disappeared. No response. I went for a walk instead. The city felt slower in the morning, like it hadn't fully committed to the day yet. A man jogged past me, earbuds in, face focused. A woman walked her dog, coffee in hand, phone pressed to her ear. Everyone moving with purpose, or at least the appearance of it. I wondered how many of them were carrying quiet negotiations inside themselves. How many had learned, like I had, to trade pieces of themselves for harmony. At the park, I sat on a bench and let the cold seep through my coat. I didn't distract myself. I didn't scroll. I just sat with the question that had finally stopped being theoretical. What do I want? Not what would keep the peace. Not what would make me useful. What I actually wanted. The answer didn't come all at once. It arrived in fragments. I wanted to be invited, not obligated. I wanted gratitude that didn't sound like relief. I wanted my presence to matter even when my wallet stayed closed. And if that wasn't possible with the people closest to me, I wanted the courage to admit it. My phone buzzed again. A new message. Not from my wife. It was from her sister. I'm sorry about last night. It got out of hand. I stared at the words, surprised by the tightness in my chest. It wasn't vindication I felt. It was something quieter. Validation. Thank you, I typed back. I appreciate you saying that. No excuses followed. No justifications. Just that. It was enough. When I finally headed home, the house felt different. Not empty. Neutral. Like a place waiting to be defined. My wife was there when I walked in, sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She looked tired. Not dramatic tired. Real tired. We need to talk, she said again. I set my keys down slowly. We can, I said. But not the way we usually do. She frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm not apologizing just to move past this, I replied. And I'm not agreeing to anything I don't mean. Her jaw tightened. You embarrassed my daughter. I nodded. I embarrassed myself for years. She shook her head. That's not fair. Maybe, I said. But it's true. We sat there, the space between us heavy with all the conversations we'd postponed. She looked at me like she was trying to find the version of me she knew, the one who softened first, who gave in quietly. You're acting like I used you, she said. I chose my words carefully. I think we got used to a version of me that didn't ask for much. Her eyes flickered. So what, now you're keeping score? No, I said. I'm setting limits. She leaned back, exhaling sharply. And what if I don't agree with them? The question hung there, raw and honest. Then we have a bigger conversation, I said. One we should have had a long time ago. She looked away. For a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she hardened. You're changing the rules, she said. I nodded. I am. Why now? Because I finally felt what it was costing me. Because silence had stopped feeling like love. Because I didn't recognize myself anymore. But what I said was simpler. Because I don't want to resent you, I replied. And I don't want to resent her. This is the only way I see to stop that from happening. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she asked, So what do you want? I took a breath. I want us to be clear, I said. About expectations. About money. About respect. And if that makes things uncomfortable for a while, I'm willing to sit in that. She studied me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into her kitchen. You're serious? She said. Yes. Something shifted then, not resolution, but recognition. She realized this wasn't a phase. I realized I was done negotiating with myself. I need time, she said. So do I replied. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not as a punishment, as a boundary. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, I felt the fear creep back in. The old familiar whisper that said, what if you end up alone? I let the question sit. Then I answered it. Then at least I'll be whole. For the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. I didn't go looking for the confrontation. It came to me the way these things always do, wrapped in concern, masked as reason, delivered with that careful tone people use when they think they're being generous by letting you explain yourself. It started with a knock at the door on a Sunday afternoon. The kind of knock that assumes you'll answer. Familiar. I stood there for a second longer than necessary, hand hovering near the handle, feeling the old reflex kick in, the instinct to prepare an apology before anyone even spoke. I didn't. When I opened the door, my wife was standing there, coat still on, keys in her hand. Her face carried that practiced calm, the one she used when she wanted something without calling it a demand. We need to talk, she said. I nodded and stepped aside. Not because I owed her space, but because I finally trusted myself to keep my ground inside it. She didn't sit right away. She paced. Looked around the living room like she was searching for proof of something. A receipt. A weakness. A reason. I don't understand what happened to you, she said finally. You embarrassed her. You embarrassed all of us. There was. Not hurt. Not confusion. Embarrassment. As if the crime wasn't years of expectation, but one public refusal. I took a breath. Slow. Measured. The kind of breath I'd learned to take when I wasn't trying to win, only to be honest. What happened, I said, is that I stopped pretending. She frowned. Pretending what? That this was normal. That being invited just to pay was generosity. That my silence was consent. Her jaw tightened. You could have handled it differently. I almost smiled at that. Almost. That's what people say when the old version of you would have complied. She turned toward me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing a stranger wearing a familiar face. And maybe I was. You've changed, she said. Yes, I replied. I have. The room went quiet. Heavy. The kind of quiet that used to scare me into backtracking. Into softening my words. Into fixing things that weren't broken, just inconvenient. Not this time. She sat down, finally. She didn't mean it the way you took it. I leaned against the counter. Intent doesn't erase impact. That line surprised both of us. I'd heard it once in a podcast months ago and dismissed it as therapy talk. But standing there now, it felt solid. She's family, my wife said. Family helps each other. I did help, I said. For years. Quietly. Consistently. Without being asked, just expected. And now, I said, I help without disappearing. Her eyes softened for a moment. Just a moment. Then the defenses came back up. So what? You're just done. The old me would have rushed to reassure her, to promise flexibility, to negotiate the edges of my boundary until it barely existed. Instead, I chose clarity. I'm done being treated like an obligation, I said. I'm not done being a partner. She looked away. That hurt more than anger would have, because it meant she understood and didn't like what understanding required. The phone buzzed on the table between us. Her stepdaughter's name lit up the screen. Timing like that always feels intentional, even when it isn't. She didn't answer. She feels hurt, my wife said quietly. I believe that, I said. But hurt doesn't give anyone the right to humiliate someone else. Silence again. Then, softer, you could apologize. There was the final test. I closed my eyes for a second, not in defeat, but in recognition. This was the moment the whole story had been building toward. Not the dinner. Not the bill. I won't apologize for having self-respect, I said. When I opened my eyes, she was crying. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The kind of tears that come when the old rules stop working. I don't know how to do this new version of us, she said. Neither did I. But for the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel like failure. Then we learn, I said. Or we don't. But I won't unlearn myself to make it easier. That was the reckoning. Not shouting. Not ultimatums. Just truth, spoken calmly, without retreat. She left not long after. No slammed doors. No dramatic exit. Just the sound of the latch clicking shut. I stood there alone, the house quiet again, heart pounding, but steady. I hadn't won anything. But I hadn't lost myself either. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message. I didn't think you'd actually say no. I stared at it for a long time. Neither did I. And that realization, simple, unsettling, empowering, was how I knew this wasn't over yet. Morning light felt different that day. Not because the sun was brighter or the air colder, but because I was different. Standing in the kitchen, coffee in hand, I noticed the subtle hum of the refrigerator, the muted clatter from the street outside, the quietness of a house that wasn't waiting for me to fill it with compromise. It felt like a pause I could finally breathe in. My phone buzzed on the counter. Text from my stepdaughter. I still don't agree with you. I smiled. Not because I wanted agreement. Not because I needed it. But because she had said something honest, and honesty, unlike agreement, was something I could respect. I replied simply, neither do I. No dots. No explanations. Just a message that acknowledged reality without surrendering my own. Later, my wife came into the kitchen. She was quiet, careful. Not testing, not defensive, just present. She poured herself a cup of coffee, and we stood together without speaking for a while. The silence was comfortable, not tense. You're different, she said finally. Yes, I admitted. I am. But I'm not different from who I've been. I'm just refusing to disappear anymore. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw a flicker of understanding. Not agreement. Not acceptance. Just recognition. That recognition was enough. I thought about the last few weeks. The dinner, the confrontation, the texts, the calls, the silence, the walks, the reflections. Every moment had led to this one. A quiet morning where I didn't need anyone else to validate me because I had finally validated myself. I remembered the man I used to be, reactive, accommodating, fading into the background. And I realized how heavy that weight had been. How exhausting it was to always serve as the backdrop to someone else's comfort, someone else's narrative, someone else's convenience. That man wasn't gone. He was still me. But he had learned something essential. Respect begins with oneself. The day stretched out in front of me. No bills to cover unexpectedly. No rehearsed smiles to manage the room. No invisible ledger tallying how much I'd given or sacrificed. Only a simple truth. I could choose my boundaries, honor my presence, and engage with the world on terms that respected me as much as I respected others. The first message of the day from my stepdaughter was blunt but direct. The one from my wife was careful. The house itself seemed to exhale along with me. There was space now. Space to rebuild relationships without erasing myself in the process. I stepped outside, the cold December air sharp on my face. The street looked familiar, yet new. Children ran past on the sidewalk, laughing. Neighbors carried groceries, chatting. Cars passed in a steady stream. Life didn't wait for anyone. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for life. I felt the weight of years loosen in my chest. I felt the clarity that came with defining who I would be, instead of what everyone expected me to be. And I knew this clarity wouldn't erase conflict. It wouldn't erase hurt. It wouldn't erase the mistakes or misunderstandings. But it gave me something better, agency. For the first time, I walked not in reaction, but in choice. I took a deep breath and smiled. Not at anyone. Not to anyone. At myself. And in that smile, I found the courage to step into the new year, unchained from expectation, aligned with my values, and finally, fully present in my own life.